Hey everybody, welcome back. So today is episode 5 in our species spotlight regarding reticulated pythons. And we're going to be talking about probably the most important part of keeping these animals today, and that is reading their behavior. They've got really limited ways to communicate with us, and we've really got to know how to read their behavior, know how to evaluate what their frame of mind is in order for us to avoid making mistakes, having bad experiences. The key to any good relationship is communication. So that's what we're going to focus on today on Intrepid Exotics. Whether you're a lifelong keeper or just getting started, help us encourage responsible keeping, conservation, and public education in the interest of keeping our reptiles safe and healthy as we protect them for future generations. You're invited to spend time with us as we experience these awesome animals together on Intrepid Exotics. So when we talk about understanding a reticulated python's behavior, we've got to kind of understand where they naturally fall into the ecosystem, into the food chain. We'll hear the term apex predator tossed around when it comes to big snakes, and it's true and it's not true. It kind of depends on what kind of snake we're talking about and what stage of life they're in. And this illustration is a really good representation of what we mean by apex predators. The term comes from those being at the top of the food chain in their particular ecosystem. Just like here, you can see the lions and the tigers, the apex predators in this particular example here. And you see snakes are actually down the list a little bit. Now, not all snakes are going to be apex predators. If you're talking about something like corn snakes, ball pythons, copperheads, rattlesnakes, things of that nature, those aren't apex predators in their natural ecosystem because there's other animals that can take them down and feed on them. And it's kind of the same thing with, we're talking reticulated pythons, berms, African rock pythons, anacondas. When these start their life, they're not large enough to, fight back against many of the predators out there. So they don't start out being on the top of the food chain. Means that they're going to be really skittish a lot of times. They're going to be really defensive. And when we bring these animals into captivity, that's what we're trying to overcome. Because if you watch a mature retic anaconda in their natural environment, they're really laid back. They don't have a whole lot to worry about. There's not too many things in the wild that are going to take down an 18, 20-foot snake or something that's, 200-300 pounds. Most of the time, they're kind of left alone once they mature. And that's the state that we look to get them in. So the reason why understanding a snake's behavior is so important is because there's certain modes that you'll find them in. There's certain trains of thought that they're going to be in at any given moment. And we've got the ability to change those modes. Now they're going to react a certain way based on what they've got going on in their head at that particular time. So you're going to find it's generally categorized by they're going to be either sleeping or they're going to be in food mode and feeding mode, or they're going to be defensive and scared. They're going to be in thinking mode, exploring, and that's the state that we really want to mess with them in. And then you'll find different behaviors around mating too. So you guys can see here's an example of going in on my male reticulated python while he's sleeping. And this is a state that you may find him in from time to time. And the tricky part about this is, of course, since snakes don't have eyelids, it's really difficult for us to tell. Are they sleeping? Are they just paying attention? But you can see his reaction when I go into his enclosure and tap him with that hook. He has a startled reaction, like, what's going on, And that's a really good indicator that we just woke that snake up. Now, just like with us, if we wake up from a dead sleep, all of a sudden, first thing we're doing is trying to figure out what's going on. There's a couple things that can be tricky about going in on a snake when they're asleep. And of course, since we can't know for sure whether they're sleeping, whether they're awake, we've got to understand that in the wild, these guys don't have the opportunity to chase their prey. So if they happen to be sleeping and they catch a scent, they catch movement, they catch the thermal signature off prey item, sometimes they're going to come straight out of that deep sleep and go right after whatever it is that's going by them. So you can end up going straight from sleep to food mode, in which case, if you stick your hand in there and they're going from sleeping into food mode, and they can get a hold of it, you can take a feeding response bite. If they're naturally, a little bit more defensive maybe, which is what you can see with him. When he wakes up, he kind of recoils his head back a little bit. I think more often than not, you're going to find them when you wake your snake up, they're going to go straight into defense mode. And that's where, they're waking up and you startle them, just like us, when we recoil as soon as something unexpected happens, and they're going to do the same thing. So we want to make sure, first of all, when we go in, if we don't see them moving around, if we just see them sitting there, need to make sure that we wake them up. And do so gently, just a little slight tap, just enough to get their attention. And then that's going to lead into another behavior. So we've changed their state of mind for the first time with that. Let's say, for instance, they're defensive when they wake up. Now, she hasn't just woken up, but this is an initial going in and getting that initial defensive response from her. And you're going to see a different kind of response too, which is pretty common a lot of times, where your snakes will square up with you, which is something you really want to avoid. And this is where using the hook really comes in handy. You can see right here where he just stops dead in his tracks. He starts staring at me. His tongue stops moving. And I just don't let that continue on with him. I'm not overreacting to it, but I'm letting him know with the hook, okay, back down. And you can see his tongue slowly starts coming around. He starts with the tongue flicks, and he's slowly just kind of backing off. And I put him at ease enough to where I can just get my hands on him. And typically, once you've got your hands on him, then more often than not, you'll see the hook go away and you can just start handling them. And it's really important, though, during those first, few seconds that you're interacting with them, that you don't make the situation worse. You don't want to overreact. You don't want to go crazy with the hook. And you can see here, I'm putting him into a tub. And he is just, once I had my hands on him, he just mellowed right out. So I changed him, just like I'm going to do to her right here. Changed him from a defensive mode to a thinking mode. That's the transition that we work these guys through. And you can see here, this is just after she had made that little shot at me. And I'm just nice and slowly with her, just interacting with her with the hook and using it just enough until I can get my hands on her. And this is the whole goal that you're looking to accomplish when you're waking them up or you're trying to transition them from one frame of mind to the next. Is you just want to get your hands on them, and you want to get them to the point where you're seeing those slow movements, even if they're trying to get away from you. That just, which retics will do a lot anyway. Because they like to explore, but. Once you get them past that point of that initial hesitancy that they've got, that initial defensiveness, and you can get your hands on them, you can start handling them, especially if it's an animal that you've had for a little bit of time, that just changes their whole demeanor and gets them into the frame of mind that we want to handle them in, which is thinking and exploring. So now we're going to talk about the biggie that we've all got to worry about, regardless of how long we've had our snakes, regardless of how well socialized they are, and that's their food response. Reticulated pythons are notorious for being voracious eaters. And although a lot of times our snakes can be so chill and so mellow, when it comes time for them to eat, you've really got to pay attention to them and you've really got to watch them. You can see here, there wasn't even any food involved here. She just had a really hot food response and she was going after the first thing that went into that enclosure. That is why we use the hooks, because we want the first thing to go into that enclosure to be that instead of our hand. Had I gotten really comfortable with her and let myself just look at her and see her moving around like that and thinking, oh, she wants to come out and play, opened up the door and reached in for her, then that would have been a food bite. She would have bitten and wrapped me, and we would have had a really bad experience there. So that's where the importance of hook training really comes through for a lot of people, is you really want to make sure that you're cutting that food response off ASAP. Now, there are going to be times that our animals are just really slow and casual about it. You can see oftentimes when you're feeding, they may not have an active food response. So when you put the food in there, they've got to, kind of realize what's going on, just like she's doing here. Had I not thrown that rabbit in there, she would have been ready to come out and play. Otherwise, As you can see here, as soon as she realizes what's there, she took it. And pay particular attention too when you go in. Watch for the really jerky movements on him when he starts to see that rabbit. They'll do this a lot of times when they've got a hot food response and they're reacting to something. You can see him just jerk really quickly here. Just that, and then pop. So if you're going into the enclosure and you start seeing those really short, rapid movements like that, make sure you got your hook handy. Make sure you're tapping them down, because there's a really good likelihood that that snake's got a really hot food response at that moment, and you really need to pay attention to changing their train of thought and getting them into thinking mode. Which brings us to getting them into thinking mode. Now you can see here, once they decide that they don't want to get out, they can be a bit of a struggle. He does this pretty frequently. But, the cool thing about it is that typically almost 100% of the time with any of my snakes, once they get out of their enclosures, once I get them out, they go, like I said, straight into thinking mode, exploration mode. They're really interactive and as close to their natural state as they can possibly be. This right here is the natural demeanor of a retic. They're confident, they're secure. It's a large animal, and they just love to get out, interacting with their environment, interacting with their handlers. You can see here, this is such a unique thing that I caught on camera. He does this every now and then. He'll come from across the yard and just decide that it's time for him to get up on my shoulders. So he'll come up, and just like he's doing here. It's always such a rewarding experience. This right here says it all for me. This is what gives me the confidence to be able to go out and talk with folks and let them know, this is what we need to be doing with our animals. Because when I can take an animal like a reticulated python like this and set him down in the middle of the yard and have him come to me and crawl up on me instead of running away, instead of being afraid, it's such a rewarding experience. And like I said, these guys are so intelligent that once they get comfortable and they get into that mode of being able to kind of understand what's going on, it's great. And this is him. Actually, when he gets tired of running around outside, it's not uncommon for him to just come back into the house and crawl back up into his enclosure of his own accord. And if you ever want to know how to kind of expedite them a little bit, all you got to do is tickle their tail. 9 times out of 10, that makes them scoot forward just a little bit. It's like their gas pedal. But this is another example right here. I take him over, set him across the yard. First thing he does is starts moving back towards me. Part of it is because, they're less comfortable in wide open spaces. He's got a lot of different places he could go. And almost all the time when I set him down, he just comes wandering right back. And this is in an animal that, maybe 30 minutes ago, maybe 15 minutes ago, he might have had an active food response. And had I went into the enclosure the wrong way, we may have had a really terrible experience. A snake this big has a food mistake and bites you and wraps you. It's a bad day for both of you. So it's paying attention to these little things like this and learning how to shift their mindset from whatever state they're in into this state right here. And once they're in that state, once my animals are in that state and I get them out, I never worry about getting bit. These guys, as soon as they get out and they start interacting, they know exactly what's going on. And, this is a confident, secure animal right here. And they're just so, like I said, they're so rewarding to work with once you learn how to kind of read their behaviors like that and help them be comfortable. That's an awesome, awesome time with these guys. So those are kind of the 4 main behaviors you're going to see with them. And there's something to keep in mind too. We talk about moving from one state into another state into thinking mode, and that being our goal. Well, we've really got to watch what we're doing and make sure that we're doing the right thing with these guys, because not only can we move them from, say, sleeping mode to defensive mode to thinking mode, we can take a snake that's already in thinking mode and misconstrue maybe a quick motion, maybe something that it's doing that may look a little bit off, and we can turn that snake defensive, so we can go backwards too. So it's really important to spend a lot of time learning your animal's behavior. And after you've spent enough time together and you get to the point where more often than not that snake is it seems comfortable with you, in my opinion, it's better to err on the side of it's going to be okay, on trusting the animal, because like I said, it's real easy to go backwards with them. And you don't want to take an animal that you spent so long working with, and say, for instance, it comes around, it bumps its nose on you or something like that, startles it a little bit, and he moves really quick, and you drop him and you hurt him, and now all of a sudden you're going backwards with him. So it's just something to keep in mind. We talk about our goal being moving forward and shifting them into a good frame of mind, and we can work with them, but we can also go backwards too. So we just got to be careful and make sure we're doing the right things with them. So I hope that kind of help put a little bit of things into perspective for some newer keepers and so forth. You older folks, you're recognizing this stuff all the way through. And it's unfortunate right now that I don't have the space for more animals, because I would really love to take in a couple defensive retics, maybe be able to rehome a couple that maybe have not had the best life, and kind of work with them and get them trusting people again, and making a whole other series on just doing that. And that's going to happen at some point, but for right now I've got finite space, so I'm sticking with what I've got until I've got more room to get some more. So don't forget, guys, like the videos. It gets it out to more people. Get down in the comments, interact, let me know what you think, let me know what you want to see, and get subscribed to the channel. So don't forget, guys, if you got any more questions or anything, feel free to hit me up. And you guys have an outstanding day, and we'll see you next time on Intrepid Exotics.